What's up, guys? I am back for another Q&A show with my good buddy Jeff. Jeff, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
We're going to pull a question from the Facebook group, the Physician Finance Facebook group, and just kind of talk through that. And if you guys have questions on your end, please post them in the Facebook group and we'll cover them in future episodes. So the question that was posed in the group, so this was about actually very close to home here. We have a little bit of bias on this question. So the question is, have you ever used financial planning services not to manage investments, but to help you set up cash flow and advise on how much of a home you can afford? What percentage of income should be saved, invested for your goals? And then do you have someone you would recommend, and how much would it cost? So that is, I say it's a biased question. That's what Jeff and I do by day. So of course we're gonna say, there's plenty of them, but we'll talk about the pros and cons of that because there is cases where it might not make sense or different directions to go. So Jeff, you want to try and tackle this one first?
Sure. So I think as we looked at the question, there are lots of different answers that come up too. And like Daniel said, we are in this business. So we certainly have a little bit of bias there. My own personal background, I came from the fire movement into personal finance, and we actually hated investment planners, math financial planners.
Yeah,
So,
hardcore
um,
DIYer.
yeah, hardcore. And just through personal experience with my own family, came to realize there can be value for others that are on this journey. So
Mm-hmm.
that's real quick me and how I even happened to get here because I didn't like financial planners. So there you go. So real quick, I think what matters here is having a good idea of what you are looking for help
Mm-hmm.
with.
Yep.
And I think some of the answers that we saw there actually had to do a lot more with investment management. So I mean, I'm gonna go to I love Vanguard personally, and the investment options that they have there. And so like if you want investment help or even just going there for like, hey, I have a goal and I want to be on track to fund it, that's not a bad option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jeff's referring to there was one answer and it was Vanguard. So we wanted to kind of give a more full scope answer, and then Vanguard can be a great option. I mean, we use Vanguard funds. I mean, Vanguard funds are
Right.
fantastic, but Vanguard also has a investment management service. They even have a financial planning service.
But so the initial question though, what are the areas that the questioner was looking for?
So help with not to manage investments, but help you set up correct cash flow, advise on how much of a home you can afford, what percentage of income should be invested versus saved based on your financial goals. So I think that's not a Vanguard sort of need there. I don't think. I mean, like it could be, but Vanguard is very much a generalist, like low touch, very general and more investment focused sort of setup if you're using them for financial planning. I don't think like a Betterment or something like that is a good solution because they're very investment focused. I think most financial planners or financial advisors or whatever they call themselves are not great fit because the entire industry is very focused on investments.
Hmm.
So that's probably what the person asking the question has already realized because the fact that they brought up, not to just manage investments makes me think that they've kind of felt that. But I mean, really, we're a fantastic solution for that. Like, if you look at our time with families, what do you think, Jeff? We're probably like 10% or less on investments. Like, the bulk of our work is more in like family and money and balancing and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, I would say I'd almost wear that as a badge, 10% or so of investment
Yeah.
time, maybe less. But I think these questions that they're asking for, looking at my cash flow, looking
Mm-hmm.
at how much home I can afford, start to get to someone that is going to lead with what are your values and how do we align everything around that. And so
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I think,
because those decisions heavy depend on values and what's most important in goals.
right, because you can always go to general rules of thumb on cash
Mm-hmm.
flow. Like I need 25% here, 25% there, 50% here. But to understand your personal values, that's going to dictate then how do we use that current cash flow to align it with values and actually achieve the goals while balancing some of these competing priorities. Because what you're going to find with a lot of investment management platforms is, all right, I want to retire at age 65 with this much money. And
Mm-hmm.
it can spit out a number and give you an amount, but then balancing those questions of, all right, how is this going to impact something else? Like, am I going to be able to afford a $1.5 million home if I'm also saving this? Am I going to be house poor versus not to do that? So,
The other thing I'll throw out is it seems like a lot of people that have not ever worked with advisors or planners are sometimes thinking like, I just need a plan. And so that's like, it's like, I just need to figure out how to find someone that can help me come up with a plan. And then I got it from there. And so if that's truly the desire, you can look for financial planning services or companies that just do
mhm.
plans only, or find like a hourly planner to kind of do a plan for you. So I'll throw out like a network, like Garrett Planning Network is like an hourly planning network, a network of hourly planners, and they'll do, plans for hourly rates, and then they give you the plan, and then you're kind of off to the races. What I have found, maybe we're skewed towards the people we work with, but like our experience working with people is that they get that plan and the to-do list, and then they're like, oh, and they have a hard time executing on it when you get into like life and day to day. And so there's a different style of planning that's more like ongoing, doing life and money together. It's kind of like concierge medicine style planning. And so that's kind of what we do, is more of like the concierge medicine style of planning, where we're going to help with like the executing aspect of planning. And so sometimes it's hard to know what that's actually like. It's hard to explain. It's hard to
Mhm.
recognize it until you've done your first plan. So I get that. Like, it's hard to know, but if you do know which direction you fall in that can kind of help with the decision making as well. But you don't have to get married to a planner. I think sometimes that's I do that with my doctor. I'm like, I don't want to change ever again. I want to get one and be done. But you can always work with somebody for a while and then graduate, or change, transition, and whatnot. That's not a big deal.
Yeah. The different types of help that you could work with, then, would you label that maybe? So you've got the one that we didn't want to look at the beginning, it wasn't even part of the question, was basically investment management help.
Hmm.
And you could look to that. Maybe you look at some of the robo advisors, Vanguard personal investment services, that type of thing. And
Yep.
usually you're looking at some kind of a percentage of your investments that go there. In our view, you're going to get kind of financial planning light there, where it's very, just give me a number to save.
Right. And it's like,
Um,
that's because they're focused on the investments. That's how they get paid. That's what they're focused on.
Number two, there was kind of the one-time type financial plan where let's look at stuff together. It's a project based, maybe it's hourly. Have you seen anything as far as pricing for
Pricing.
that? I think that the price was one of the parts of the question as well, if I
Right.
recall.
Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Yeah. That's a very wide range, but I would say the pricing for like a one time plan, if you're talking overall, it's a big range, probably like, a couple thousand to like up to 10,000.
Mhm.
If you start to narrow it down to like physician specific planners, I would say probably more like 3 to 6 thousand for a one time plan. That's Some of the firms will do a little bit of a discounted rate for in training, but I would say a few thousand, maybe like a 4,000 average plan or fee for the plan. If you're in practice, that's kind of what I would ballpark. I don't know, Jeff, you think that's a good ballpark for that?
That was the range I was going to give, somewhere in that really 5 to 10, maybe three on the lower, really low end there, for
Hmm.
a plan that's going to look at a lot of areas of life and really dive deep, and not just say, all right, you want to fund $100,000 for college, save this much a month, but
Hmm.
get into the values anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good qualifier.
And
And
then, oh, go ahead. Were you going to go with the
ongoing.
third one?
Yep.
Ongoing.
Yeah, so that's the other category, ongoing. Pricing for that. I think most of the firms doing that, including us, are doing like a monthly fee. And so I would say, if we're talking annual, because we've already been talking annual, let's stick with annual
Mhm.
pricing. They usually charge monthly, but like if we look in annual terms, I think 5,000 a year is a good average for that. With a lot of them charge like an upfront fee as well to get started, or they lock you into the contract.
Mhm.
For example, for us, we charge an upfront fee, but don't lock you into the contract. So you can leave at any time. So, depending on what that is, they often will charge an upfront fee, and I'd say the average is about 5,000 a year. Now that pricing will typically flux up and down depending on circumstances. So like in training, so like I'll tell you what our average households are paying
Mhm.
like in training, a couple thousand a year is probably a good average across the board. Now, somebody that's like single is going to be different than like married with children and both
Mhm.
spouses work. But I think a couple thousand is a just rough average. And I think that's what the industry is charging. And then in practice, I would say, it can range a little bit more. Under probably 10,000, 4 to 10,000 would be the average for most physicians in practice.
Yeah, I think, and from what I see, especially kind of the early attending, new in practice, is probably in that mid thousand range. Not mid 1,000, but somewhere in the
5,000.
5,000 range.
Yeah, right. Now, if you're further along or you own a practice with employees and like multiple lots of accounts and that's going to obviously add to the complexity and it's going to go higher. But so another little side note, the last thing I'll throw out is like a lot of Jeff mentioned at the beginning the investment focused firms. There's a lot of like financial planners that say they do the third thing we talked about, but that charge like the first category. So that gets a little confusing. But like a lot of financial planners will like do the third, like we're doing financial planning, like we'll do cash flow, all this stuff, but we charge based on your assets. So that's kind of a confusing setup because they're charging based on investments, but they're doing the other stuff. So typically with that setup, when you don't have a lot of assets, you end up kind of getting into this low touch situation where you're not going to get much love just because of the nature of the way it's charged. So, but it tends to be on average 1% of assets when they're doing that model is what they typically charge. So, I mean, that sounds like a good deal if you got $100,000 account, right? But what happens is as your wealth builds, you end up, and you want them to give advice on the full scope. You end up with like, several $1,000,000 with them. That's like, $2 million, that's 20,000 a year, if it's 1%. So those fees kind of creep up pretty fast in that setup. But, it can work well if they're giving you good service and they're just charging 1% and the balance is lower. I mean, but sometimes you get what you pay for. Sometimes you don't. It's hard to say.
I think the key to all of this is just to really know what you are looking for as a service too, because our experience, like Daniel said, vast majority could actually probably use just the extra ongoing help. And there's a lot of value in that. If you're listening to this podcast and you just love personal finance, you might be skewing even more a little bit towards I would just like a plan and I will take it and run with it option as well. But just knowing what you're looking for, know the areas that you want expertise in too.
Yeah, all good stuff. I said one more thing, but I got one more thing.
One more. All right, this is your last one more.
The last one more thing is the free financial advisor. The free financial advisor is not good. They're never good. So the ones we were going over, it's kind of like, one could work better in this situation. But the one that's free, you're not going to get objective advice, and they're selling stuff to make money. So I would steer clear of that setup, like the free financial advisor. And they're typically working for like insurance related companies.
Definitely a really good rule of thumb, if not almost an absolute there.
This is coming from me. I used to be that one. So, all right, Jeff, enjoyed chatting with you again today, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone next time.
All right. Hope someone finds the right fit.